Well, hi and welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's a Friday in Adelaide, so I thought I'd do a Friday magazine flashback. I've done this sort of thing before. I have a huge collection of photographic magazines. I've given away some, I've tried to sell some, but I've still got a huge backlog of them here. And so I thought I'd just share something today from out of interest from it's a March to April 1994 edition of commercial photography in Australia, and I'll just show you the cover. There it is. You can probably read most of that there, and then I'll read out what it says in a minute. Get the light a bit different there. Okay, so biggest issue ever, it says. 12 top image makers go desktop. Incidentally, this cost me $4.20 back in 1994. Electronic imaging special. How the microchip is changing the way we make and sell pictures. But I thought I would have a look at these top photographers, and I'd check out on the internet to see if I can find some of them still active. 12 top image makers go desktop. Read a little bit about each of them, and also there's an ad in here for a camera which is interesting, and I'll share that with you in a minute too. So let's have a look and see who the first one is that we're going to look at. In those 12 they've included News Limited photographers, but I think they're not focusing on any one photographer, so I'll just skip that one, I think. Let's have a look. Who have we got first up? Photographers Start Your Engines is the article that is the prelude or introduction to these series on these 12 photographers. And I'll just read that out to you because it's interesting. This is by Robin Gower, who was the editor of the magazine then. Significant technological change has managed to bypass the photographic industry so far. The information superhighway is coming, however, and photographers are reinventing themselves as image makers with new vocabularies and markets. Traditional film will continue to be the primary recording mediums for the foreseeable future. Well, 1994, I guess it was at the time. But many images used in the brave new world of publishing will have a digital component. In this issue, Commercial Photography in Australia profiles some of the country's leading image makers. All traditional photographers, they have spent the last 2 or 3 years investing time and money in their futures. Rather than talking about the hardware, which reinvents itself too regularly, they have chosen to be more philosophical about equipment. All see computers as tools offering a greater range of creative options. All warn, however, that the process of acquiring new skills and equipment can endanger smaller businesses without defined and established niche markets. Excuse me. The idea of having no creative limits has intimidated many taking their first steps into electronic imaging. Some are employing younger designers to help them redefine their boundaries. Another important issue yet to be resolved is copyright. Lines easily blur with regard to who owns what, and memories are easily erased. The law has yet to catch up with the technology. Work produced on commission is being used for other unsanctioned purposes, and there are some very serious problems to be worked out. And there's a follow-up article on page 72 of this magazine about that. I won't go into that one though. While the industry is now experiencing an uncomfortable settling-in period, photographers will eventually gain the upper hand with imaging, making new inroads along the information superhighway. The language of digital imaging will soon be universal. Learn the dialogue or lose your voice. Well, that was pretty true, wasn't it? So the first photographer here is a guy called James Widdowson, and I'll turn the page over and show you a couple of his photos. There's a headline at the front of this one, says, when you first start playing with computers, you tend to go a bit crazy with all the special effects. Then you go to the other extreme and start exploring the subtleties. And I'll just read a little bit from this. Rather than shouting his message from the rooftops, James Widdowson chooses to run his business like a boutique for some of Melbourne's fussier clients. With a small system including a Macintosh Quadra 700 and various add-ons, James and two part-timers, Robbie Rodriguez and Dallas Graham, produce a range of illustrative work for top-shelf clients including Mercedes-Benz, Pioneer, Kodak, Yaka and Australis. Since they first plugged the first SCSI cable into the Mac 18 months ago, they have experienced a range of emotions at the hands of the equipment, but now seem comfortable with it. James has had a consistent career in advertising photography, more than 10 years, of many of which have been spent at the church in South Melbourne. He has also shot a lot of fashion for Maya and Just Jeans, with teams of top models and stylists. Combine fashion with a love of all things funky, including techno music, and you have an easy entree into the world of digital imaging. A stickler for detail, James familiarises himself with the features of many top-end systems over a number of years. Frustrated by a lack of control and substandard results, he knew he had to acquire retouching skills of his own. After a busy year shooting for Maya, which left him in a trough, he called up a couple of experimental filmmakers and set up an Amiga users group. When you first start playing with computers, you tend to go a bit crazy with all the special effects, he says. And I read that out before. Anyway, I won't read on. I've actually looked up all these photographers to see who are still active and still got something on the internet, and not all of them have. But anyway, here's just a little bit of the work of James Widdowson, some of the things he was doing. What else has he got here? Nope. There's another one over here about a motor car ad that he was doing in black and white. So that's James Widdowson. I'll put a link to whatever I've got found on him on the internet so you can have a look. I'll skip the News Limited article because that's not really talking about individual photographers, I don't think. Clive Kane. I seem to think I've heard that name before, and I think I couldn't really find anything on the internet about him now, but that doesn't mean to say there isn't. So someone else might know of Clive, and I think he was fairly strong around the place when I was back first getting into photography. He says here, I can now do all the things I wanted to do in photography without the time and effort involved. Of course, some of these people would be getting on now and probably retired, like I am, and these were guys that were, I think, older than me at the time. So when Clive Kane started getting serious about digital imaging, he commissioned an industrial investigator in the US to research the type of companies getting involved. When he was told that Kodak, Fuji and Agfa were the biggest investors, he knew the writing was on the wall. Goodness me. Kodak and Agfa, I don't know where they're at today. Fuji are still going strong. Anyway, he didn't find it threatening. After almost 40 years in photography, so there you go, he'd be quite old now, if he's even still alive. After almost 40 years in photography, he was feeling pretty bored. In order to kill some time on the weekend, he bought an Amiga computer. Now there's an old name. Some golf and motoring games and started having fun. I won the Indy 500, but I couldn't beat Greg Norman. That was more than 4 years ago. Soon after, someone told him he could scan photos into a computer, and things have never been quite the same since. And plenty has been written about Clive's foray into digital imaging, but he's the first to admit he doesn't really know it all. When I first started using Photoshop software, I thought I knew everything in the first 3 months, he says. Then I started finding new pathways, new doors, which led to bigger, darker spaces, more ominous than the ones before. So that's the part I've been reading from about Clive Kane, with some of his photos, fairly abstract sort of shots up the top there that he's done. There's not a lot more about him in this. I could read the rest of the article for you. It says here he was Max Dupaine's partner. There's a famous name in Australian photography, for more than 4 or 5 years. So Clive still believes in the one lens, one light concept and says computers will never make bad pictures good. He also feels that the integrity of the photograph should never be compromised, something which designers don't often understand. And he now runs, this is the time of this being written, 2 Macintosh computers with tons of gear hanging off them, and 3 scanners including a Nikon LS3510AF, and says some of his clients, including Volvo, Jaguar, Mercedes and Qantas, are reluctant to use his new skills. So there you go. And there's a whole list of all his equipment that he was using at the time there, which is quite interesting compared to today's results. There's a pic that he's done for Qantas, flying high, a Qantas shot. Okay, so that was Clive Kane. The next one is John Bader. I'm not sure whether I've looked up on John at this stage to see if he's still on the internet, but if he is, I'll put a link. I'm going to put a link to these things I find underneath this article here. So, John Bader. I used to get frustrated by the limits of photography, but now I can get the results I'm looking for. He was a renowned food photographer, apparently. Renowned food photographer John Bader has been quietly tapping away on a keyboard for a couple of years, building up a marvellous portfolio of work that could easily find its way onto gallery walls. A recent British immigrant, John seriously considered a career in computer programming before choosing to study fine art. On graduating, he assisted some of London's best food photographers before starting out on his own, shooting portraits for Interview magazine, amongst others, editorial and food. He quickly acquired a taste for travel, which so many people do, of course. His favourite client, Carsten Burmeister, eventually became his partner, and it was at their North Sydney studio that John rekindled his interest in computers. Carsten had a Mac, which I started playing with in my spare time, says John. I became hooked. It's interesting how a lot of us photographers are keen on the Mac systems, aren't we? I've always been on the Mac. I really don't know how to use a PC properly, even though I used to use one at work. Like many of his contemporaries, John's use of the Adobe Photoshop program has come full circle. At first you try to plumb the depths of what it can do, but then you end up exploring the subtleties. The bottom line in all of this is good, solid imagery. So there's just some of his interesting photos there. That one there has probably been manipulated on the computer, I think, which we're all keen at doing some of that to start with. And a couple of other images there. So this is very much, hang on, where are we? Up there. The stuff that some of us were playing with back in the 90s. Although I didn't really get into the digital imaging at that stage. Who have we got next? Richard Wilson. Richard Wilson is the next one. I'll just quickly show up there. There's some stuff by him. Come back to that in a minute. It's very difficult making decisions in this area. You hang your whole economic future on one decision, making decisions about the digital imaging. Quality, quality, quality is a cry most photographers understand, and that's why Richard Wilson has positioned his lab at the top end of the market with more than $1 million worth of digital imaging equipment. Some of Australia's most interesting campaigns have been produced or touched up at Richard Wilson's, and while the man himself is a little camera shy, he has a high profile in the advertising industry. With almost 30 years experience in manual print, negative and transparency retouching, his interest in digital imaging was obvious. The last job he did by hand took more than 100 hours, but together on the Crossfield Mamba workstation he installed 2 years ago, it would take 7 to 10 hours tops. Digital imaging comes as a great freedom, he says, not only because you save time, but you can now do things you couldn't possibly do before by hand. Richard, who has a background in photography and design, honed his skills in Melbourne in the early 70s. Recognising the potential for a retouching service in Sydney, he moved there in 1975, operating for a time out of his bathroom at home. Business boomed to the point where he could justify opening a full-service lab in North Sydney in 1982. It still operates on one mezzanine level of a 3-storey business. I could read on, but I'm running out of time. I can see I've already been going for about 15 minutes. There's one of his advertising creations, and some other shots there. Interesting one there. I think I might have to cut this a little bit short. Peter Walton. I'll just read the names of some of these, and I'll put links underneath to whatever I can find on them. Peter Walton's still going, and he's a landscape photographer, or he was at the time, amongst others. He purchased a Macintosh Quadra 950 and is currently transferring around 400 to 500 images onto CD-ROM disc. There you go. Some of his landscape work back then, if you can see some of that. So it's Peter Walton. John Gollings. I found something about him on the internet, so you can still find something about him. He says, I was getting bored before all this came along. I feel invigorated again. Here's a beautiful shot he's done some work on with his computer system of a baby there. Brent Melton. Brent Melton, he's from Sydney, is a Ram Wars survivor, having fought many a battle on behalf of photographers staking a claim in a digital future. One of the true pioneers, Brent's association with digital imaging goes back to the mid-70s as a student at a San Francisco university. There he took a class called Perceptual Psychology. The lecturer showed us some experimental images on computer in what he called the quasi-fourth dimension. Brent says, I was absolutely fascinated with what must have been the beginnings of multimedia. As a realist, painter and illustrator, Brent used photography as the basis for his work. It wasn't until he formed a friendship with American landscape photographer Ansel Adams that he became hooked. But he was also smitten by computers at the time. There you go, just show you some of his work there. That's sort of a composite type of a thing that he's done there. You can see the artistic bent and the creativity of the type of things that he was doing. I haven't been able to find much about him on the internet at all, but if I do, or you can do a search anyway. Nadish Naoroji. Photographer says here, photographers have all the skills necessary to create whatever images they want. Landing in Melbourne in the middle of the recession was bad timing for Bombay professional Nadish Naoroji. That's Naoroji. Nadish, Nadish. Rather than bemoan the situation, however, he used the time to learn all he could about digital imaging. I couldn't really find anything about Nadish on the internet either. This looks like something that he did. Oh no, that's an ad for Bowen's. Just an interesting ad of the day for Bowen's lighting. Andrew Neal and David Will. Tim Hanfield. I'll put these names on and you can do some research yourself, see if you can find them. And then this ad here, I'm just going to read this ad out and then I'll close, I think, for our little magazine flashback. There you go, look at that. Nikon 35 Ti quartz. And this ad says, it's interesting, I was mentioning fuzzy logic on the video I just did the other day, which is about to go to air soon. Photography captures life treasured moments. A great camera makes great photography easier, more accessible, more exciting. For more than 40 years, Nikon has created the world's most comprehensive range of 35mm professional cameras and lenses, all employing superb optical, mechanical and electronic technology, all designed with just one purpose, to help create the world's greatest pictures. The Nikon 35 Ti is a new breed of Nikon with the same superb high refractive index, low dispersion glass in its 35mm f2.8 Nikkor lens that has made the Nikon name a legend in fine photography. Its exposure control system places the 35 Ti in a class of its own, with Nikon's exclusive 6-segment matrix meter and 3D fuzzy logic autofocus system. with an incredible 833 precision focus, with an incredible 833 precision focusing steps, with a titanium body, metal lens barrel, advanced microelectronics, and a range of creative options never before available in a camera of this size. You'll have to see the 35 Ti for yourself to fully appreciate its extraordinary achievement. Perfect for your personal photography, a partner in professional assignments, a camera to treasure, built to last for years to come, an extraordinary advance for great pictures. Definitely Nikon. And on the back here there's an ad for Kodak T-Max 400. There you go, that they were pushing at the time. So I'm going to stop about there. So let me know what you think about this. As I've been going through this, I've been thinking maybe I should use all these articles I've got on photographers, particularly Australian ones, and some of them you can see came from overseas originally. Maybe go through my magazines and just pick out one and do a profile on each of them and see if they're still operating these days. That might be an interesting exercise. Anyway, I'll try and do some more of this, and I hope you found that interesting. I'll put some links that I can find in the notes underneath, and like if you like, subscribe if you wish, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.